I mean, Newark was not the most integrated place. It was very noticeable. And so we looked around, and all the Afro-Americans had to sit out in the parking lot.
Okay. Looking
So
good.
yeah, it was a different life, a different thing before the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Okay. I think we're good.
Grandma, what question would you like to answer next?
I want to do the, how did you heard Grandpa was in World War I, so all right, so how did you and Grandpa meet? All right, I went to Hunter College. I went to college on the subway. Hunter College is in Manhattan.
5
I got
cents.
my Bachelor of Arts there, and I was a history major and a minor in economics and political science. And this, at that time, was an all-girls school. And then, after I graduated with my bachelor, I went to Teachers College, Columbia University, which was full of men.
Hooray!
And that is where I met your future grandpa, who was had gotten his BA from St. John's University. He was also a history major. So this was a marriage made in heaven. Where did we meet? In geopolitics. What else? And we started to like each other. We met on the subway.
And what year was this?
We both got our bachelors in 1951, and the master's was 2 summers and a year. I got my master's in 1952 in the summer, and I think he got his in January or something like that. So that we graduated with masters in 52, and we were married in 1954. One thing about religion we're going to mention. Our mother's family were Jews. My father's family were, he was baptized Episcopalian. They were Protestants. And this was very rare in those. 1926, my parents were married because her brother, Joe, was the one who brought my father home. But there never seemed to be problems that way. Both our parents were atheists. They didn't believe that there was a God. My mother said that she could not believe there would be a God who would allow that horrible war. But Gerard and I both went to a Reformed church, which was a Protestant one. But so John Hurley, who I married, was a Roman Catholic. Okay. But it's interesting because his mother was a Lutheran. His father was the one who was a Catholic. So you have many different religions in your family. So we were married in 1954.
In what city?
Right in Bridgewood, in New York and Queens.
In a miraculous middle church.
In a Catholic church. In those days, if you married a Catholic, I was a Protestant, you had to promise to bring your children up Catholics. And I did. And it was a wonderful idea because their poor father had to take 3 boys to church every Sunday. And one cannot sit between 3. And I was sitting quietly in the Presbyterian church, not having to sit down, stop fighting with your brother. Anyhow, so we never really had any problems with that. In fact, my husband wanted me to go to church. My first job was in New York City in a vocational high school. Now, in those days, vocational high schools were where kids went who couldn't go to regular high schools. This was in Queens also, so it wasn't as bad as some of the ones in Manhattan. And I was not prepared. No matter what I learned at Columbia University was not applicable to Queens Vocational High School. They needed to segregate the boys from the girls. They do not in the same classes. I had all boys. I think they were machine shop people. They had 4 classes of social studies and English and science, and the other 4 classes would have been there, whatever.
Vocational stuff.
Okay. It was every morning. They were on triple session in that school. In other words, I didn't start school till noon.
Wow.
And I was home at 6 o'clock. So and it was, I'm not going to go into any of those details. It was very, very, very difficult. But luckily, my husband got a job right away on Long Island, and so that I taught in the New York Cities for 2 years, and then after we married, we lived out on the island, and we both taught in the same school. So we both taught 8th grade social studies
Aw.
for
Did you
quite a few years.
Did you teach a few?
And one half year I taught in the school with my mama. I taught
Oh, yeah.
2nd grade, which was the longest 6 months of my life. Oh, it was worse than Queens Vocational High School.
Oh, the floppy came forward. The name of the restaurant was Mosbach's.
Could remember.
No, it was Niederstein's.
Oh, that's right. It's Niederstein's. Yes,
Okay.
Niederstein's.
That's where I was married. That was
Yes.
where the, yeah, that
And it was so old, and they hadn't upgraded it yet because of the war. The fans were run with a leather strap from a central motor.
We got to move on here. Let's
Yeah.
see. So
Mosbach's,
John
that's
was
right.
teaching.
No,
in-
Niederstein.
in a-
Mosbach's
in a
was
school
another one that's closed down.
on Long Island. And when we married, we moved to further out on Long Island, and we both taught in the same school for quite a few years. And we had 3 marvelous sons. All were born in this patchwork in Long Island. But I could see that John was not going to spend his whole life teaching social studies 8th grade. He needed to go further.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to take certain courses to keep your license and so forth. So we went on a summer session. You were 3 months old. Yeah, you were born in February. We went out there in June. And he met a kid he used to play basketball with, who was teaching at the University of Connecticut. And he persuaded your grandfather to go for the doctorate. And so your grandfather being very good politically, got the first sabbatical from that school that we taught at on Long Island. And we went off with 3 little kids and $2,000,
Oh my gosh.
which we used to have to pay into our teacher's retirement
Okay.
fund. And so he went for 2 summers and a year, and he got all of his doctorate was in supervision and curriculum in education.
Sure.
And he had everything done with the dissertation when we left. And he had to promise to come back to teach. I think it was 2 years. I don't know, anyhow. But he had an opportunity. He was just about finished with the dissertation, which is tough. And his major advisor at UConn, there was a job open in Vermont for a Ford Foundation grant. There had been an
That's still around.
accident.
Yeah, for Bennington.
Yeah, in Bennington. And the Patchogue School District said, okay, you can go, even though you haven't
Finish your
finished your
medical or whatever.
your
commitments with
the
us.
commitment if Myra would take his classes, because I was only doing substitute teaching with 3 little kids. And so off we went on our adventures to many, we're going to go into all those details. We lived many, many places after he got the doctorate. We were in Saratoga, he was assistant superintendent. He left public school to go into college teaching, and we finally, in 1973, my youngest son, your father, was in 5th grade. His brother was in 7th, and his brother was in 9th, and we came to Geneseo, where I still am.
Right now. At this very moment.
At this very moment.
Do you want to say how much you started out in life with John?
How much money? He had a Ford automobile, and I had $2,000. And that was
Started-
because our father
started
never
from
taught me
nothing.
how to take money out. Our first jobs were $3,200 a year with master's degrees.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Crazy.
yes, really remarkable. And no, I will mention the fact that teachers
Are still underpaid.
Well, then not only that, teachers didn't even get Social Security until we've been teaching a couple of years. And there were no unions. The principal could come up to you and say, huh, you're not coming back tomorrow. They can't do
Told me
that
about
anymore.
that before. Yeah.
Yeah. Your grandfather was also very brave. Well, he would go to the Board of Education without tenure and talk that teachers need to get raised. I think by the time we left, we were up to 5,000 a year.
Wow.
What else we got here?
Got the last chunk, and then
What have you liked best about your life so far? What's your happiest or proudest moment? I think the happiest and proudest moment has been having a wonderful husband, wonderful sons, and most wonderful daughters-in-law, and glorious grandchildren. No,
that's
this
not
is
one
true.
roommate, Grandma.
No, it's true. I mean, it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but it was a wonderful thing to have. When I would see, as a teacher, so many children, and I know you have too, who do not have a good family like that. What do you think has stayed the same about you throughout life? I think love of family. I didn't have much choice about what I was going to do for my life, because I had a choice. I was going to be a nurse or a teacher. But I really loved teaching, and I loved history. And I was able to combine them, and having a husband who was the same, because we worked together. We had National Science Foundation grants, and we were able to teach together for quite a few years. I was able to teach the college sometimes, and then of course my final teaching was at a high school in this town. So, and what marriage did to me was to change me, and it changed him too. I was a very shy and a frightened person. I was afraid.
I can't believe that.
Oh yes, my dear. I was afraid to talk on the telephone. And I think that was from the war experiences. And maybe someday I can talk to you about the Holocaust, but I'm not going to do that tonight. But, and my husband, he said, how did you ever marry me? Because he was completely different, right? He was...
Not quiet.
No, he was, as you know, lost his right arm when he was 6 years old. And he was able to do things that you wouldn't expect a person to do. But he was really willing to take chances. When he decided he was going to move, that was why am I going to do that, you know? So I think that changed me quite a bit, I think. I calmed him down, and he boosted me up.
It's a good balance.
Yes, it
It's a
was.
good match.
Yes. Because when they first offered me the job at the college, when he became assistant dean, I said, John, I can't teach college. I don't know how to do that. He said, Myra, do you know more than college sophomores? I said, well, sure. So he said, go ahead. And later on, he told me he didn't think I'd do it, but I did.
Aw.
Yeah. And
The last one.
last one, what advice do you have for your grandchildren and future great-grandchildren? Follow your stars, kid. Don't give up. You come from good stock. Just think about all your ancestors who got on those boats. And the ones from Germany didn't be able to speak a word of English. And look what we all have accomplished. Just think. Doctors and everything in our family would not have happened if those ancestors didn't jump on those boats and come here. We'd still be what?
Peasants.
Peasants.
In Blacksfields in northern
Yes.
Scotland.
Did you want to add anything about your life? Or,
Well, just that when you talk about how children are using their machines for everything,
yeah.
before the prosperity of the 1950s, there were no cars, virtually no cars in Ridgewood, and in fact, Traffic Avenue was
No traffic.
a dirt track up until the Depression. They had the Works Project Administration came and made it into a hard surface road, and so when it's just like you read it in the books. When we got home from school, we all went to the same school, 93. Well, of course, not right away. They built Miraculous Meadow after the war, and so some of the friends were there. We went to 93, and my sister escorted me to school when I was in the kindergarten, and
Yeah, we had to work 9 blocks.
Oh man.
oh, I have to change my hearing aid. So after school, we would play the street games that you read about now. We played all those games that you read
Not
about
many
now.
cars came down the
And
street.
there were so few cars that when somebody got home a little early, we asked him to move, and he would move so we could still play the game. And yeah, then went to high school in Grover, Cleveland, with people that I knew from grade school, and then I applied, to Queens College first, and I was accepted there. But a good friend of mine at the time said he was going to Cornell, and he said, "Why don't I apply?" And I applied, and I was accepted, and I graduated, in 4 years. And to show how old it was, the way to get to Cornell at that time was 2 railroads, the Lehigh Valley and the Lackawanna. And so the first time I went on the Lehigh Valley Railroad, and then the Lehigh Valley closed down my last year, so we went on the Lackawanna. And it was advertised the route of Phoebe Snow, because she could wear a white dress because it went through the anthracite coal area.
Shouldn't get
so-
dirty.
So that was, and then I graduated from Cornell, and
He was an economics major.
then I had a sort of menial job, but then I was drafted, and I was in the Army
2 years, right?
for 2 years, and I was in Fort Benning, Georgia, and that before the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It was just like you read in the newspapers. The one particular reason, Imogene Coca was a very big star with Caesar on a television, and she came through Columbus, Georgia, and she was playing the Princess and the Pea. That's an old story, and the pea on the map. And so some of us guys, I was in the Ivy League platoon, because at that time, whether you believe it or not, you were drafted, you went. And so my floor, we had 2 guys from Yale, a guy from Harvard, Cornell, various other colleges. And so we wanted to see Imogene Coca, and so we went to the theater in Columbus, Georgia, and we're looking around. No Afro-American. We were by this time we were used to that. So we were sitting, I thought, way up. Well, why? The Afro-Americans must have wanted to see Imogene Coca, because the last 3 rows in the furthest balcony, that's where they were. And so for those of us who served in the Army at that time down in Fort Benning, and you went to town and you couldn't go with the guys you were serving with, and the road, also, unless you've ever seen the movie Gods of the Lake, once you got off the main road, the back roads were just like at the end of Civil War. They were red dirt. I had never seen red dirt like that except when I dug the foxhole in Fort Benning, and they were the dirt road, and the people were living in what they call shotgun shacks, because it was a hallway straight through, and rooms on both sides.
Oh, that's what that means.
And so if you shot a shotgun,
It would go through the whole house.
it would go right down the hall. It wouldn't hit anybody.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Well, you had to be in.
Had to be there.
Had to be there, and so it is so different today. It's impossible to believe how, unless you're my age and had served 2 years in Fort Benning in Georgia, and
Only 82-year-olds remember.
and so it was. I was on Infantry magazine, and the funniest thing was. I was on KP duty one day, and
Kitchen patrol.
people were coming through, and who did I serve the mashed potatoes to? A guy I knew from Cornell. Now he was a writer, and so he should have been on Infantry magazine, but because he got his degree from the agricultural school, they sent him off to the quartermaster's corps, where he learned to grade beef.
Wow.
And then, when they wanted to send somebody to Germany, do you think that they would take me? I had taken 2 years of German. They took a high school kid.
Oh, man.
And so I served 2 years in Benning. And then I was also a peacetime service because I was too young for Korea. And then I served the 2 years in the infantry. And then when Vietnam started, I had
out before then. Yeah.
I had
Done
finished
your
the
time.
active reserve, and they didn't call up the inactive reserve that I was in, and I was a school teacher, so I was.
Well, he went back to school and he got his master's from New York University.
Yeah, I went back to get my master's from NYU, and that was the. At that time, NYU only had a few buildings around Washington Square. It's not the huge one.
But it is today.
And I witnessed the first sit-in for, I guess it was against the Vietnam War or something.
Probably.
The building I had to take a class in, 4 or 5 people were sitting in front of the elevators. And, you know, at that time, we were not that politically involved or anything. We just took the elevator up to class, but so I was witness at the beginning.
So you didn't sit with them, you went up the elevator?
What?
You did not sit with them, you decided to go up the elevator?
No, I was... hey, I was in the Army, my father was in the Army, you know, we didn't know... We should have known better that the officers didn't know how to fight the Army, fight the war. The privates knew, and because Lyndon Johnson was a desk officer in the Second World War. He was in the Senate, and Franklin Roosevelt said that they needed all the experienced politicians, and so he served the war in Washington, which means that, unlike John Kennedy Jr., well, John Kennedy, he accepted what the admiral said. And you know, anybody who's ever been in the Army or the Navy knows in those days you couldn't, because there was no instantaneous communication like today. And so he accepted, and so when he became president, he accepted what the generals were saying. And you don't do that even today, some of the generals, you just can't accept what they're saying. And so that's it spiraled out of control. And so then, we all were sort of against it. But I became involved in politics like my father. John Lindsay was
Your favorite person.
yeah, sort of a mentor politically. And that's where I got Jeffrey Katzenberg from. Because Sid Davidoff and Jeffrey Katzenberg were John Lindsay's chiefs when he ran for election. And I knew Sid Davidoff and Jeffrey Katzenberg, but because I was in Queens as a teacher, I didn't keep up with him because Katzenberg became head of Disney after a while. And now he was in one of the magazines as a philanthropist. And so then we campaigned for John Lindsay, and to show how time has changed, when I was campaigning for John Lindsay the first time, I was accused of being a young Lindsayite upstart communist.
Oh wow.
And now I'm a conservative.
No one's throwing that around anymore.
But the other things, but as with my sister, I'm glad with the family and everything, and I enjoyed. We traveled all over, you can see, and now we're still campaigning for politicians. And when I went to vote, I was 2 days too young to vote when I was 21. On November 11th, the date was November 9th, and I was not 21 yet. I couldn't vote until I was
Yes,
the
before
following
the
year.
18-year-old
That's
amendment.
funny, yeah.
was in.
And my mother gave me my instructions. She said I should support women. And so I
Good
supported
advice, great-grandma.
Geraldine Ferraro,
Heard that
and then
name too.
Kathy, and now
And I still
Grace Ming.
support Kathy.
I turn it off, I'm going to I have to echo what my sister said, the last ones about the family and the
Oh,
people I know.
it's really nice, Uncle Jerry.
That.
Signing off.
And so